This is a basic outline of a quilt that I did that had an irregular shapes on the side. The top and the bottom edge was like this, and then down the side, and these are hexagons. The entire quilt was made up of hexagons. If she didn't want to trim any of this off, she's going to bind it this way. So I decided I wanted to use an edge-to-edge pattern, but I wanted to be able to use fill inside, so I would not have tie-offs from using the trim. So this is the basic shape of this quilt. Now I used the geometric hexagon, and I took it all apart using divide pattern so I could use different sections to make this outline. I did this in SAM, and then I saved the project and brought it to the Statler, and I've actually stitched out part of this outline. In this quilt group, repeat patterns edge to edge with fill inside, and this is the garden pattern, border to border by Annie Bright. So I like this pattern, and I'm going to quilt it on this quilt using fill inside on the edges. First thing I'm going to do is set up the pattern on the quilt. So I go to repeat patterns, click on it, you can see all the height of this pattern is 12.12, the width is 14. Now all I need to do is put in the width of the quilt in this area and the length of the quilt in this area. The way I have this set up, the width is 52.8, and the length is 56.42. Okay, I got all the numbers in. I clicked OK. Now the problem is this would just go from edge to edge, and I suppose that would be okay. I used the crosshairs on the left and on the right to check how this quilt was going to fit, and it looks like it's going to fit okay. But now remember, the sides are irregular, so I have to do something. I have the boundary clicked in, and it doesn't matter that this boundary comes down into the second row, because I'm only going to do fill on this first row. So I'll select all the repeats in the first row. All the repeats in the first row are selected. Now I'll right click and go down and select fill inside. Okay, Creative Studio has finished figuring all of these points, and it has trimmed off using inside fill all of these points that would be outside the edge of the quilt. Now I like this because this is going to start on this side, and it'll quilt. When it gets to the edge, it'll quilt along the boundary to the next point, and it'll continue to do that all the way up and across the top and down this side until it's finished with the row, and it will do tie off. One tie at the beginning, one tie at the end. I've toggled all the other rows as sewn just so that we can see where the start of this is. You can see it's going to start here, and the end of this row is here. Now I've toggled all those rows back as unsewn, and you can see it starts here, and we looked at the end of this row was here. Then the start point of the next row is over here, but that's going to be off the edge of the quilt, so I'll have to, when I quilt this first row, I'll roll it, I'll make a new boundary outlining the area, and I'll do an inside fill and quilt the next row. After I quilt row 1, you say, okay, how are you going to locate this project again? Because your original start point is gone and you can't reach this start point. I have quilted this row, rolled the quilt, and then I want to relocate. So how am I going to do that? Notice that along the bottom, this pattern has many points. I have rolled the quilt, and this point is way up next to the take-up roller. I zoom in, I right click, select relocate, shift all to one point, follow the instructions, says click on a known point on the CAD screen. This is my point. I click it. Then it tells me to move the machine head to that point. I've done that. Click yes. Now it has relocated the entire quilt project around that one point. Now this is up next to the take-up roller. So next thing I'll do is do another boundary, and then select the second row and do the inside fill, and I will continue to do that, and I will continue to use a sharp point like right here, the point of this leaf. I'll continue to quilt and roll and use relocate, shift all to one point, make my boundary, use fill inside, and each row will have a tie at the beginning and a tie at the end. Using fill inside for edge to edge work is not that difficult, but it does take a little bit of practice to get to know where do you relocate, what kind of point to use. And I like this because it doesn't matter where the start and end point of the pattern